Chapter 11, Nowhere to Go. Randy and DC stepped out of the police station and were nearly flattened by a kid riding a bike down the sidewalk at full speed. Sorry, the boy called out, but he didn't stop. He seemed to be chasing a black SUV that had just disappeared around a corner, heading for the park at the center of town. That's the Boston kid, the one whose dad has been hanging out with Dean Sutton. Nice bike, DC noted, and Randy had to agree. The silver bicycle was brand new with thick, all-terrain wheels. Where's he going? No clue, Randy said. Let's find out. Randy and DC jumped on their own bikes and set off in pursuit. The chase ended when they turned a corner and found the street and sidewalk blocked by a crowd that had gathered outside the town hall. The citizens of Deer Creek had caught the mayor on the way back to his office. Is it true you're postponing the festival? Someone asked in disbelief. If the time capsule isn't found by midnight tomorrow, we don't have any choice, the mayor responded. But the bunting and the ribbons, someone else moaned. What will we do with all the bunting and the ribbons? Bunting's the least of my problems, Betty Prufrock pointed out. You postpone the festival, and Dean Sutton's going to own my ice cream parlor in less than a week. I'm sorry, Betty, Mayor Landers responded, but I've done everything I can do. You want to save the festival? I suggest you have a word with the sheriff and convince her to do her job. The mayor charged up the stairs and into the town hall, leaving an angry crowd in his wake. Without the festival, there would be no presidential visit, and that meant no tourists and no money. The people of Deer Creek could lose their businesses, or worse, their homes. This isn't good, DC said. Randy knew from his expression that he was thinking about the apple orchard. My mom's going to be pretty upset when she hears. I guess I better get home. Yeah, me too, Randy agreed. I'll meet you at the hideout tomorrow at 9 a.m. Oh, I'll come to your house this time, DC insisted. I don't think my mom's going to be in the mood for company. Randy heard a faint wheeze when her friend inhaled, and she knew the stress must be aggravating his asthma. Don't worry, DC. You're not going to lose the orchard, she tried to assure him. We'll find the time capsule before midnight tomorrow. I know, DC said with a smile. But Randy could see that he wasn't convinced. By the time Randy arrived home, the dinner table had been set. Uh-oh, not a good sign. She checked the clock on the kitchen stove and grimaced when she saw it was already 6:30. An angry voice was coming from her dad's office, and Randy crept down the hall to investigate. I tried calling, but she won't answer the phone. This isn't like my daughter at all, Herb grumbled. Oh, yeah, thought Randy. How would you know? First, she shows up an hour late for lunch. Then she storms out and doesn't check in, Herb continued. I just don't know what's gotten into her, Mei-Ling. She's upset, Herb. Her whole life has changed. You should give her a little more time to get used to things, Mei-Ling replied. Randy was surprised to hear the woman pleading her case. What I should do is ground her, Herb Rhodes replied. Randy had to think fast. She still had a bone or two to pick with her father, but nothing could get in the way of her investigation. The capsule had to be found, or DC's mom might lose the orchard. She couldn't afford to be grounded, not tonight. Give him what he wants. Be who he wants you to be. A silly, stupid little kid. Randy tiptoed back to the front door and re-entered the house, calling out cheerfully, Dad, I'm home. Here goes. She heard Herb stomping down the hall and held her breath. Oh no, Randy thought when her father walked into the kitchen with his arms folded across his chest. Grounded for sure. You know we have dinner at 6 o'clock. Where have you been, young lady? Sorry, Dad. I should have checked in. It's just that DC and I were having so much fun that I lost track of time, she explained in a bubbly voice. We found that lost cat. You know, the one whose picture is on those flyers around town? She pulled the $50 bill out of her pocket and waved it in the air. We got a reward and everything. Herb let his arms fall to his sides. Who's DC? He asked. Whew, Randy exhaled. He's a kid I met yesterday. His mom owns the Goyton Orchards now. We started a club. Herb cracked a smile. Since her mom died, he'd been after her to spend more time with kids her age, and she could tell he was pleased that she'd made a new friend. When he forced his smile into a frown, Randy knew what it meant. He wasn't mad anymore, but he didn't want her to think he was letting her off easy. Let's try to be more responsible from now on. Mei Ling had to set the table tonight, and that's supposed to be one of your chores. If you want to be treated with respect, you first have to earn it, understand? He asked. Randy nodded humbly. Okay then, let's enjoy dinner. Mei Ling made an amazing meal for us. Crisis averted, Randy thought as Herb helped himself to catfish dumplings. You know, Herb said as he spooned sauce onto a dumpling, I've been researching the Miss Catfish contest. I don't think it would be so terrible if you entered. That's how you've been spending your time while I've been trying to save the town? Randy wanted to ask, but she knew better than to smart off. Even Mei Ling was keeping her eyes glued to her own plate, making sure no one asked her to weigh in on the subject. Entering the pageant's too risky, Randy replied with a mouthful of dumpling. Risky? What if I won? They'd make me wear that stupid catfish hat. It's a crown, honey, Herb corrected her. Whatever, Randy said. The subject was making it difficult to keep up her silly, stupid little kid routine. I'm not entering a beauty pageant. I don't care if people think I'm pretty or not. It's not about being pretty, her dad argued. The pageant's a tradition. It's a way of showing that you're proud of your town. Don't you want to show everyone that you're happy to call Deer Creek home? I'm not, Randy mumbled as she pushed the food around on her plate. Excuse me? I said I'll think about it, Dad. Really? Herb asked hopefully. No, said Randy, deciding it was time to turn the tables. By the way, did you ever call your editor back? Did you find out what he wanted? Yes. Randy's face lit up. Really, Dad? No, Herb admitted with a mischievous smile. I haven't had time. Come on, Dad, Randy said with a groan. You've had plenty of time. Don't you think you should start writing again before you forget how to do it? I'm too busy helping you settle in, which is why I think the pageant. There might not even be a pageant this year, Randy said, cutting him off. The mayor's going to postpone the Founders Day festival if somebody doesn't find the capsule by midnight tomorrow. Herb Rhodes stopped eating long enough to study his daughter's face. I hope you don't think you're going to be that somebody, Miranda. I don't want you poking around in places you don't belong. It's too dangerous. Herb picked up his fork and took a big bite. By the way, these fish dumplings are delicious, Mei Ling. It's all in the spices, Mei Ling beamed. How are your dumplings, Miranda? Fine, replied Randy coolly. Herb shot her a stern look. Hey, Dad, said Randy. I saw Sheriff Ogle this morning, and she told me the story about the Founder's treasure. How come you never mentioned it before? It's just a legend, hon. No one really believes it exists, though I do remember searching for it a few times when I was about your age. Did you ever find anything? Asked Randy. Sure did. It was on one of those hunts that I discovered your mother, Herb said. She was the greatest treasure of all. He stopped and cleared his throat. Listen, kiddo, I know you're upset about what happened this afternoon, but I'm just trying to do what's best for our family. So hold a sec. You're saying that a person should do what's best for the group, even if it might upset a person she loves. Is that right? Herb pondered the question. There's an old saying, the needs of the many outweigh the desires of the few. I suppose I agree with that way of looking at things, unless the few happen to be your parents. He ended with a hearty chuckle. It's just a big joke to you, Randy thought. Let's see if you're still laughing tomorrow. Randy woke at 7 a.m. after a restless night of sleep. She'd tossed and turned for hours, worried she wouldn't be able to locate the time capsule by midnight. What would Glen Street do? Randy rolled out of bed, and a bright yellow book on the night table caught her eye. It was a Mandarin Chinese dictionary with a note attached that read, For Mei Mei, love Mei Ling. Randy was certain the book hadn't been there the night before, which meant Mei Ling must have placed it on the table after Randy had fallen asleep. Had Mei Ling checked on her like she was a baby? She's got a lot of nerve, Randy thought. She opened her bedroom curtains to let the morning light in. On the front lawn below her window, a figure wearing black silk pajamas was practicing what looked like the ancient martial art of Tai Chi. Randy watched Mei Ling's graceful movements. Her entire body seemed to flow from one position to the next as if she were made of water. Randy picked up the note Mei Ling had left her during the night and stared at it again. May. What did it mean? Her curiosity got the best of her. She flipped through the dictionary until she'd pieced together the phrase. Little sister, Randy whispered. She read the rest of the definition. An affectionate term for a younger friend. Then she tossed the note into the wastebasket, slipped into a pair of jeans, and ran her fingers through her tangled curls. After Randy's bed was made, her laundry separated, and the rest of her chores finished, she grabbed her fedora and headed downstairs. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee, hot cocoa, and bacon filled the air. The house was cool and quiet, except for the sounds of Mei Ling preparing breakfast in the kitchen and her father typing away in his office. She found Mei Ling standing at the kitchen counter and cracking eggs into a bowl. Ni hao, Miranda. I'm making American-style hotcakes. You like hotcakes? I saw you in the front yard. How long have you been doing Tai Chi? Mei Ling continued mixing the pancake batter. I learned in Hong Kong when I was young. I started training again a few years ago when my husband died. It helped me with my grief. They say it is very good for the body and mind. She paused and looked up at Randy. If you want, I could teach you. No, thanks. Randy checked her watch. It was already 8:45. Where's DC? She pulled out a stool and sat at the island while Mei Ling served her a plate of pancakes and some hot chocolate. Randy stared blankly into the cup and then hesitantly took a sip. It was warm and creamy and tasted a bit like cinnamon. Although Randy hated to admit it, the stuff was delicious. She settled in and took a bite of the pancakes. Mei Ling hummed and ladled more batter onto the griddle. A bleary-eyed Herb walked into the kitchen with an empty coffee mug. Morning, he said, half yawning as he pecked Randy on the forehead. Mei Ling? Ni hao, Herb. Would you like some breakfast? Smells great, said Herb. We haven't had pancakes in a while, have we, kiddo? Thanks, Mei Ling. I'll take it back to the office. Mei Ling flipped a batch of pancakes with chef-like precision and placed them on a plate for Herb. Randy saw the weariness in her father's every movement. His eyes were puffy with dark circles underneath, which made him look much older than 40. She could tell that he'd pulled an all-nighter. You look tired, Dad, she said, trying to sound casual. Can he be writing again? She thought. Had a lot on my mind lately. Listen, sweetie, about yesterday. I should have told you I'd moved your mother's paintings to the cellar, but putting a few of her things in storage doesn't mean we'll lose her forever. Remember, she's the angel on our shoulders now. She'll always be with us. I know, said Randy, avoiding his eyes. Herb replied with a tweak of her nose, then retreated to his office. Mei Ling smiled and wiped down the kitchen counters. Randy watched him go and checked her watch again. Still no sign of DC. Has he given up? Is that why he's not here? She started for the door, but turned back to Mei Ling. Thanks for the pancakes, she mumbled quickly and ran out. Upstairs, Randy grabbed a book from the shelf in her bedroom. The previous day had been tough for DC. As each hour ticked past, he and his mom got a little bit closer to losing their home. Randy could understand why someone might feel a bit hopeless in his situation. If DC needed a confidence boost, she knew just what to give him. With a book in one hand, she dug through her closet in search of the special dobok her mother had bought her after Randy's first big competition. The martial arts uniform was hanging in the back behind her winter coats. Randy had outgrown it, but she hadn't had the heart to give it away. Now she dusted it off and wrapped it, along with the book, in brown paper. Then she crammed the bundle into her backpack and darted back down the stairs. The sheriff's cruiser was parked in DC's front yard when Randy rode up on her bike. DC's mom stood barefoot at the top of the front of the steps with her thumbs tucked into the pockets of her ripped jeans. From a distance, she looked tough, like a rock star or a motorcycle chick. When Randy got closer, she could tell from the woman's bloodshot eyes that she'd been crying. Dean Sutton waited by the cruiser as the sheriff delivered an orange piece of paper to DC's mother. You said a week, Mrs. Cruz yelled at Sutton. She snatched the paper out of the sheriff's hands. Now that it looks like certain the festival will be postponed, I'm afraid that you aren't going to be able to make the back payments, the banker informed her. The festival hasn't been canceled yet, said Mrs. Cruz. We still have until midnight, right, Sheriff? That's right, ma'am, Sheriff Ogle confirmed, shooting Dean Sutton a disgusted look. Please try to understand the bank's position, Mrs. Cruz. We've done just about all we can do. Our hands are tied, Sutton said, almost sounding sincere. However, given the circumstances, the bank is prepared to give you until the end of the week to vacate the premises. But we don't have anywhere to go, cried Mrs. Cruz. She plopped down on the front steps, tears streaming down her face. Randy spotted DC crouching behind the porch. When their eyes met, he took off through the orchard. She chased after him on her bike. When she caught up with him, DC was standing at the base of the lookout tree, taking his frustration out on a fallen branch, but failing miserably at his attempt to break it. He angrily kicked the limb aside and took a deep puff on his inhaler. It's going to be okay, Randy tried to assure him. I don't want to talk about it. He gave the branch another kick. Remember, you've got to become like water, Randy said. What? DC asked, annoyed. You're thinking too much about breaking the branch. Empty your mind and your moves will flow like water. That's stupid, snapped DC. I wasn't the one who came up with it, said Randy, setting the package at his feet. Look, the way I see it, we have to find that time capsule now. Sure, said DC sarcastically. If we find it, the president will come and the mayor won't cancel the festival. You won't have to move, and we can be best friends forever. We're not going to find it, Randy. We're just a couple of dumb kids. That's exactly what you're acting like, a dumb kid. Randy headed to the hideout door. If you want to help, I'll be inside reviewing the case. And just so you know, Bruce Lee was never a quitter. Peeping through a hole in the hideout's wall, she saw DC stare down at the package she'd left at his feet. Then he picked it up and ripped off the wrapping paper. Inside was the dobok, a black belt, and a book called The Warrior Within, The Philosophies of Bruce Lee. Randy giggled when she saw DC's jaw drop. He flipped through the book and stopped at a page she'd marked. She remembered the words she'd highlighted. Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless like water. A newly inspired DC walked into the hideout and got to work. While Randy pinned a large sheet of paper to one wall, he unloaded her detective kit. So what's next? He asked. Randy smiled and took a magic marker out of her backpack and began to make notes. We know the time capsule is missing. We know it was taken the day the monument was moved. Angus McCarthy and Dean Sutton are our two prime suspects. McCarthy's motive is revenge. Sutton's motive is greed. You got that one right, DC said with an angry sneer. And there might be a link between our two suspects. Angus McCarthy's mad that he had to sell his dad's old cabin at Rock Hollow. The Boston businessman who bought the cabin is in town, and we've seen him in the company of Dean Sutton. Do you think McCarthy and Sutton are working together to ruin Deer Creek? DC asked. I don't know, Randy admitted. All I know is that everything seems to be connected to Rock Hollow. The capsule disappeared when Angus McCarthy set a skunk loose on the mayor. You know why Angus McCarthy hates Mayor Landers? My dad said Angus once accused the mayor of stealing something out of Toot's cabin in Rock Hollow. But there have definitely been a few people snooping around up there lately. And at least one person pretending to be a ghost. Randy sat down on the floor and stared up at the notes she'd made. Rock Hollow. Angus McCarthy had to sell the cabin in the hollow. Dean Sutton hanging out with the cabin's new owner. Guests spotted at Hollow. Pumpkin found hiding in the cabin. Angus McCarthy accused Mayor of stealing from cabin. Angus's father, too, lived in the cabin. I think we should have another look at the evidence we collected at Rock Hollow the other day. DC dragged a box out from under the hideout's table. He passed the evidence to Randy piece by piece. A plastic baggie filled with cat hair, the tape they'd used to lift the impression left by the ghost boots, and the cast of a paw print made by a fat feline with 6 toes. Hey, how about that? DC said, grabbing a magnifying glass for a closer look at the cast. He passed the glass to Randy. Glittery, brassy specks were embedded in the plaster. It's the same stuff Pumpkin had all over his fur when we found him. Sheriff Ogle told me it was mica. I guess it's a pretty common mineral around here. Common enough for a cat to be covered in it? Remember how Pumpkin sparkled when we found him? Interesting point, Randy said. Where could Pumpkin have come across that much mica? Why was someone trying to catch him? Remember that wail we heard? And the puddle of pee Pumpkin left in the corner of the cabin? Someone must have scared him pretty bad. But what would someone want with that doubled cat? DC said, his enthusiasm beginning to dwindle. What does any of this have to do with the time capsule? You've got me, said Randy. Rock Hollow seems to be at the center of the mystery, but I feel like we're missing something important. I say we check out Dean Sutton, DC said. Why is he here at my house with an eviction notice before the official deadline? How come he's so sure that the time capsule will be found? He knows something. I'd bet anything on it. The question is, what? That's what we have to find out. Here's the plan.